Bam. What's up, Karen McMahon? How are you?
I am good. How are you, Clint?
I'm good. That's just, you know what? Let's just get the lies over with right now. What we're about to talk about is, I think, and I'm not going to go down the road of exposing my or your struggles, but I will say that when the people watch this video, just understand that we too have had obstacles during the last 4 to 6 months.
Absolutely.
Hey, do me a favor. Can you turn me down just a little bit? Because there's an echo when I talk. For some reason, I hear myself back to me. There we go.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Beautiful.
Deep breaths now. And for everybody watching this, me and Karen spent the last 3 minutes before we came on the air. She took a turn telling me about her lovely life up in New York, and I took my turn telling her how it is down here south. How is it in New York right now? Because you live right outside New York, don't you?
I live on Long Island, right outside of the city. Yeah. And we just experienced the hurricane. I was up at my mom's. She has a house close to the beach. So we got slammed on Tuesday. A lot of trees down, a lot of electric out. So on top of everything else that people on the East Coast are handling, the hurricane threw another monkey wrench into life.
You know, and I don't know if it's because we're just not used to hurricanes that far north that it didn't make the radar screen in big news. Like, you know, normally when you have a hurricane, and it may have just been I've been disconnected, but normally hurricanes, we see it on every headline. And with this one, I don't remember it getting the play that the other ones did.
Yeah, I mean, it was a level 1, although it was less rain, and I think the winds went up to 60 miles an hour, which is why we had so many downed trees. So this is the beginning of the season, and it certainly was nothing like Hurricane Sandy, but it rattled the houses.
If you're underneath a storm like that, the category at that point is really, that's something for the headlines in the news. You're like, I still got trees down, house damage, no electricity.
And when you go to the beach right afterwards, it's like being sandblasted. Like the winds are so strong that you have to have eye gear on, and you have to be fully clothed because it'll blow the skin right off of you.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about co-parenting. We're going to get into the meat of what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little co-parenting. And I want you to, once again, tell our viewers, because people watch this at different times, not only what does Journey Beyond Divorce do, but why the genesis? Why did you start this? Why did you go down this road versus 1,000 things you could have done?
Yeah. So Journey Beyond Divorce is a team of life coaches who help men and women through the before, during, and or after stages of divorce. And that takes place on 2 different realms. One is the practical realm of understanding the foreign world of legal, financial, custody, and all of those issues. And then the other one, which is really our sweet spot, is the emotional realm of the overwhelm and pain and difficulty of navigating such a multi-dimensional, emotionally charged transition.
Yeah, one thing that I learned that you've told me a bunch, and you've told probably all your clients, is it does, and this sounds so cliche, it does get easier to manage the further you get away from the moments. A little distance helps, but it still comes. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I've been through it. It's almost not quite 4 years, but the waves still come.
Yes. Well, and it's like any kind of grief, right? The waves are smaller and they're further apart. And yet it could be a song, it could be a holiday, it could be so many different things where you feel that sting. The sting isn't as devastating, but it's there. And it's part of that grieving process that happens so slowly.
When I moved, because I've had to move a couple of times in the last few years, it's really, I mean, again, I'll say this and everybody will resonate with it. There's moments where everybody feels like, I got this. Whew, I'm glad that's over. Man, that was hard. And then you move and you start unpacking these well, however long you were in this relationship, you start getting these little knickknacks out of the drawers that you hadn't seen in 5 years or 10 years, or that photo album that's been dust on it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got to go get a box of Kleenex again. And dadgummit, it comes in different forms.
Yeah. And certainly the big one too is when your ex is involved with somebody else, and especially if it becomes serious, or I have a number of people who are just finding out about engagements or upcoming weddings. And so even if you're the one who asked for the divorce, there's just something there about that new chapter, that newness that brings a sting to the wound.
Well, you can cut the tree down, but the roots underneath the ground are still intertwined. That's just the way it goes. They're still all bunched up and twisted. And I think that's why these kind of conversations are good for people to have. And these podcasts and videos that we have are good for people for a couple of reasons. One, I started watching them. It lets you realize you're not alone. It's been mapped out territory. A lot of what you're going through is 100% normal. So you're not crazy. There's hope at the end of it. But with that being said, one of the things that you have done, and the way I found you, and you've actually started doing more of, are videos and podcasts. Do you like those?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's actually the main way that people find us. And if I could plug that we're about to start.
No, absolutely not.
We're about to start a series called Voices of Celebration, as you know, as one of our former clients, that we're going to be bringing in people who are 2, 4, 6, 8 years post-divorce. Because what you just said, that fear that life is never going to be the same and it's always going to be bad, almost never comes true. And certainly if you do the kind of work that we do with our clients, I would say if I have 1% of clients who are devastated on the other side, that's it. So the Voices of Celebration are really going to help people hear real life stories about, not that life is all roses, but that it's not what my greatest fears were. And it's good. In fact, it might be really good. And that's what we want to share, so that just to provide more hope and encouragement.
Will they be able to find that at journeybeyonddivorce.com, or is that going to be a separate URL name?
So our website is now jbddivorcesupport.com.
Well, I need to take that off the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I didn't actually notice it until now. So you will find us, but that's an old site. And
look at that.
jbddivorcesupport.com is our main website. And then it'll be on our Facebook page. There'll be podcasts. So we're everywhere on every platform as Journey Beyond Divorce on the podcast.
Well, you said two things that are true, and then I'll move into the co-parenting, because I actually have a couple of real life questions for you. Two things are true. Life will never be the same again.
Right.
And it won't, and it may not be as good, but it could be as good in a different way. Because I think one of the things that we get stuck on if you go through these big moments are, it's never going to be the same, which you're right, and it's never going to be as good. Well, it will never be as good because it's never going to be the same. It doesn't mean it can't be as good in a different way, though. So I had to learn how to change my definitions of what good was. I had to learn to change my definitions of what happy was, because so much of it was wrapped up in this. And when that went away, I was left with this big vacuum.
Right.
And that's hard.
Right. And that's part of it is figuring out what you want the next chapter to look at. And I think the place where it's often better is because we learn our behaviors that haven't served us and we change them. And so the reason it's better so often in every relationship is because you've changed. And so you're engaging differently. You're not as reactive. You're not as resistant. You find yourself in greater ease through difficult personalities and circumstances. And that enables you to have a rewarding life regardless of how people and circumstances show up.
I really like the way you deliver stuff, because you're very calm and you're very methodical. I just like to say this. The part that I say every time that stinks is when you're talking to somebody like Karen and she completely ignores you when you talk about the other person's shortcomings, and she only allows you to talk about the stuff that you did wrong. That part really, it's very helpful. I'm just telling you, before you go into, if you are dealing with a good therapist or a good counselor or a good coach, whatever one it is, they are always going to say, oh, okay. And then they're going to ask you about yourself. Just be ready for a little bit of pain.
It's all about you, Clint.
Yeah, trust me. I would say something and she goes, oh, that's interesting. So how did you handle that? That's not what I'm talking about, Karen. I want to talk about the other person, because when you talk about me, it makes me change. And but you're exactly right. That's where the true freedom comes from.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. So let's talk about co-parenting a little bit, especially there's some big questions around it overall, but during the quarantine or the virus, it's changed. I've seen it personally change on a few levels. But I see it some friends too. You're not able, a lot of people are not either out of fear or out of reality, whatever side of the coin people are on. Kids can't visit family like they used to, even extended family. They don't get to see the grandparents maybe like they used to, or the cousins. And have you had any calls around that kind of like, how do I do this?
Yeah, we do a free virtual group every 2 weeks. And the last one, which was 2 Thursdays ago, was all about the children and how to handle it. And everyone reacts differently. Everyone has a different health level of handling the pandemic. And then everyone abides by rules slightly differently. And so there's all types of things. There's everything from what you're describing, which is a lack of FaceTime, like personal in-person time with your children. And then there's the way you abide by the rules and maybe the way your ex does, and the fear of your child's safety or the fear of your safety. And so it is just this kind of brewing, boiling issue. And for some people who are able to co-parent well and amicably, it's still a challenge, but there's not that additional emotional piece. And I think you're probably more in that position. And then there are people who have the lack of connection to their kids and the struggle with their ex.
Yeah, and I think there's so many big stories in this, or big perspectives, that the smaller ones just get overlooked because they're just the FaceTime part of it with the secondary side of the family. In other words, I may be able to see my mom and dad, even because they're going to drive, and even if they can't hug me because they may have a condition, but they can see me if they're working well together, right? But it's the grandparents and the cousins that I was talking about, not only from the kids' perspective, but listen, there are grandparents and other cousins and uncles and aunts that haven't got to see those extended family members. Zoom does not work really. I'm glad we have it,
yeah, but
it's different than the hugs.
I think that everyone I know is starving for some hug time. You're very limited right now. And if you're someone who, I belong to a church community, and we finally had an outdoor service, and still you're doing the elbow and it's not the same. It's just not the same.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And then for kids and grandparents, like all the more potent. Yeah.
Well, I'll throw this out there. Again, this is not a political commentary. You can come down on whatever side you want to about going back to school. That's a different podcast. But if you have children or family members who are teachers, but do you have a group of people going back to school, I would recommend to a parent and grandparents, check on those kids the first month or so, because they're going to try to make it normal. But kids are really good about being anxious under the surface. And I would bet that the amount of anxiety they are going through, they won't talk about unless you make the effort.
Right. And I think for children, the anxiety is in isolation. So for instance, tweens and teens are like wolves. They run in packs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just go through that period of time where there's always like 20 of them or something. And they can't have that. And so I think between the concern about the health of themselves and their parents, and then those other social changes, it's really important to talk to your kids. And the one tip I always give when it comes to talking to your kids is, as parents, we tend to tell. 2 ears, 1 mouth, ask, listen. don't tell first. Like we will learn so much about our children when we ask questions and ask open-ended questions. I have two sisters who don't have kids, and they tend to ask these yes and no questions, and then they're like, I don't have a conversation. So when we ask those open-ended questions where our kid can elaborate, we learn a lot, and then we know what to tell, so that we're touching on exactly what they need.
I try to be better at this, and I think I am to a certain degree, but I think inherently women are better at what I'm about to say. Is they'll ask the question, especially to a teenager, and in my experience with my mom, she would say, so how was your day? That's fine. But she'll ask the question two other different ways. So what'd you learn today? Or who'd you hang out with today? And it forces me, after about the second or third time, I'm actually talking in sentences.
Right. And there's that period of time where they rarely do that, right?
Oh, yeah.
I used to have, my kids were very young when I divorced. And so I wanted to know what was going on when they weren't with me. And yet I didn't want them to feel interrogated or anything like that. And so we instituted a highlights and lowlights. And so at dinner time, we would go around the table and you would give a highlight and a lowlight of your day or of your weekend with dad. And it just became this fun thing. And so if you think of something that would inspire your children to talk, and it becomes a routine, it's really a great way to build communication. And just on the topic of kids, my children are in their early 20s. Building solid communication, especially through the tween and teen years, is so vitally important, because I would rather them tell me things I don't want to hear than them not communicate with me. And oftentimes as parents, we're quick to shut down what we don't like, or even in the way we discipline, and to be careful that you're always leaving that communication door open, that you're always a safe person for them to come to no matter what they have to say, is a beautiful golden rule to go by.
I would tell my buddies the things that my son Jacob would tell me about when he was, from the time he was 10 till even now. But not as much now, because he's moved out a couple years ago, and I talk to him very infrequently, which just, breaks my heart, but it's supposed to be that way. That's a good thing. That's right. How it's supposed to be. Go right. Build your life, buddy.
Right.
But he would share stuff with me that most kids don't share with parents. And my buddies would look at me, all my guys would be like, really? And all the women were like, I'm so jealous. I wish my kids would share that. So I felt blessed. But sometimes he would share stuff, and I'd be like, you really want to talk about that one? He'd be like, yeah. I'm like, let me look at the manual of how not to screw this up as a dad. So I feel very blessed that I've somehow, despite my mistakes, I still have that kind of open communication with the kids. You said something, though, that I wish we could get back to, and I try to do it. Until COVID, I got my daughter was with me 2 weeks of every month. And so it was great. 4 weeks would be better, but then that would be selfish. And her mother thinks the same thing. Her mother was like, 4 weeks would be way better than just 2. But we tried to have dinner at the dinner table. Yeah. And I think we missed that because, other half of the time me and her having dinner in front of the TV. Yeah. But we don't have those dinner conversations that I grew up with. And that's my fault.
Yeah. I actually, I find the same thing, being a single mom, and who's running to what sport and what have you. We didn't do a lot of family dinners, and my son, who moved out to Seattle and is settling in with somebody, and they have one of those families that sit down and have dinner. And he called me to tell me how much he missed it and how much he loved it and how much he wished we had done it. And it's one of those things where you go, oh, gosh, I wish I could replay it and do it over.
Don't have to be at baseball at 6 o'clock then. Well, I grew up, I was lucky. My mom and dad, I had that. We still have it, until, again, COVID. Sunday afternoon dinners, most of the time, we're at my mom and dad's house with the family. So it was good stuff. I'm going to try to ask this in the clumsiest way possible, because I don't know how to do it any other way. I know of people that are single parents. They have a decent relationship with their ex, when it comes to co-parenting. And I'll use me, but I know they feel this pressure too, to be the other parent to their child. In other words, I'm the dad, but when I have my daughter or my son, I feel like I also need to play the part of mom. And I've never been a mom, so I do things trying to be a mom. Or if it's the reverse, I'm the mom, and when I have my kids, maybe they don't have as much time with their dad as I would like. So I'm having to do things that I think a dad would do, which creates these moments of awkwardness and a lot of insecurities and like you're failing.
And your question is,
how do you feel like you're not failing?
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
That's interesting. I think that
did I explain it correctly?
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, it's an interesting concept. I think that the truth is, if you're a present parent, I mean, I guess if my son called me recently because his car broke down. And I was like, Chris, like, this is so outside of my wheelhouse. And I love that I'm your first call, but I got nothing. Like I had
Does the wheel turn?
You call Uncle Jim. What if you do this? Here's our mechanic's phone number. And I did. I got off the phone and I was like, I'm pretty well-rounded, but when it comes to automobiles breaking down, I'm not your girl. And so I'm okay with that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because even then you can direct them. So I have found myself directing my son, and even when he needed, like if his dad wasn't around and he needed, suggesting Uncle Jim, suggesting Uncle Ron, like making suggestions to help him get what he wants when I can't give it to him, as opposed to trying to be something that I'm not. So I think that that's really, to know what your kids need and to be able to support them in finding it is actually a beautiful skill to teach them, because we're not going to have everything.
What and again, I clumsily was and that's a disgrace to clumsy the way I put that. But the pressure to be, when I had my daughter, and I won't use the other people that I know I've had these conversations with, but when I had my daughter and she was younger, I felt a lot of pressure to try to relate to her about certain things, which I would have no history on. Right. And so we would have these conversations and I would try, but I think the authenticity to say sometimes, I just don't know. Right. Let's research this together. Let's figure this out. Let's call somebody. I think that's what opened up that door where they felt free to talk to me about things that were not in my wheelhouse. That's why he called you.
Yeah. And it's true, though. I think that honestly, the rule in general is always be authentic. So, no need to make believe we're more than we are with our kids. I think that there's actually a tremendous amount of value for our children to understand that we too have our limits. And yet, even if I'm limited and I can't help you in that area, I certainly can help you learn how to help yourself or to find what you need. And so, yeah. I think so often we put that kind of pressure on ourselves, and you expand to more creativity, and then it's like, okay, I can't, but who can, or what can?
When you're first going through this, though, I completely can relate to the pressure of not wanting to seem like I already feel like I failed at keeping the family together with the kids, right? I got that as a parent. You've got the guilt of, okay, I feel like I've let them down here. Now, I don't want to feel like I'm letting them down in these other ways too. So I think what I hear you saying, and you said it to me, I'm putting off on them what I'm feeling myself. I'm assuming they see me as this inadequate person, when in reality, your mom or dad, they don't care.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you're going to be the go-to, and which is great, because if we're the go-to, like I remember having a conversation with my daughter, and I forget what the topic was, but she found all this information on Google. And I was like, so I might suggest that Google's not always the best place to find your information, since everyone with an opinion is on there. And we had this conversation about, how do you vet what you're researching? And so everything our kids come to us with is an opportunity for us to pour into them. It really is. And if we're in fear of being inadequate, fear kind of cuts off creative thinking. And so to be able to forgive ourselves, I forgive myself, I am who I am and I'm not anything else, but I'm smart enough to always help my kids figure out how to get the help they need. And I think that builds a stronger bridge between you and your children. It teaches them that we're all limited and imperfect.
Yeah, and it's also, I know you wouldn't use this word because you're better at it and people pay you to use better words than I do. I have to use, but it's not selfish, but it can be a little selfish to think. It's easy to become, as a parent, when you're co-parenting, to think my kids see only me. My kids only see my failures because that's how I see myself. And so what happens, I think, at least when I first got a divorce, I was a lot of times seeing me as I would see me if I were them, but I've never been them. I only had my eyes. And so I had to let go of my ego and let go of, it's not about Clint, it's about the kids. And if they have a problem, they'll tell me.
So I want to ask you something.
No. That your turn's next Wednesday. No.
When your children reflect back to you what you've taught them, what does that feel like for you and sound like to you?
So when you're saying, like, when they say things back to me that they've heard me say, well, it depends. When you said damn it, and now your 9-year-old saying damn it, you go, oh, that's not good. But I think if you're talking about big picture stuff, it feels good to know they've been listening.
I recently had a situation where I was very discouraged, and my daughter, what came out of her mouth was what I've been saying to her for years. So it's like the way that I encourage and lift her up is the very thing she gave back to me when she saw me in a place of struggle. So how beautiful that she sees me in a place of struggle. I'm human, I struggle. And how amazing the gift was for me to hear my words coming out of her mouth with such compassion and empathy, and you got this, Mom. And it was a reflection. And so one of the things I would say to your listeners is, the more we pour into our children, the more we focus on their positives and pour into that, you'll hear it back. And it's just such an incredible gift. And if you're a single parent feeling like, you're lacking something, focus on what you have, not what you don't have. Pour into your children, focus on their positives more than their negatives, and you'll start getting that back. And it's such a gift.
Now that you said that, I had, when my son was young, we would want to go for his first job. I made him go in and actually fill out job application instead of just online. And I made him meet the manager and shake the hands and ask, do you have any job? He did not like me at all. What's funny now, though, is now that he's older and he'll talk about these young kids that do that, he's like, they don't even shake my hand or ask. And I look at him and smile, and he goes, I know. But yeah. See it?
Exactly.
Hey,
and those are cool moments.
What kind of podcasts do you listen to? What do you do? What are you listening to when you're not helping other people, or do you just sit in silence with wine?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a self-help junkie. So a lot of times I have to consciously choose something else. And so there's I tend to listen to podcasts about how to build your business. Lately, I've been diving into people who are talking about YouTube and podcasts for marketing purposes. And then I like to listen to storytelling podcasts. But I am so home. When I was in my car a lot traveling, I listened to so many more podcasts. And now that I'm so home as everyone else is all the time, I find myself listening a lot less.
So what do you do? Okay, so this is the great, we'll get to know Karen a little bit. So how do you keep your the saw sharp? In other words, if you don't, at least in business wise, if people can keep sawing so much on the log that the saw becomes dull. They don't unplug enough and keep it sharp and oil it up and dry it off. How do you keep yourself sharp? Because the worst thing for your clients is for you to be dull.
Yes. And that's so vital. And it's actually, it's an ongoing practice for me because I will admit I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so it's very important to draw the line. And when, as you know, when you work in your home, like often I'll be like, step away from the laptop, Karen, step away, close it, walk out of the room. I try to make sure to have a Sabbath. That's something in the last few months. I'm a Christian, and we had a grow group where we talked about the importance of silence and stillness, and that there's a Sabbath for a reason. I actually have a Orthodox Jewish client, excuse me, and she taught me, like, I used to always think, God, that's so restrictive. Like they can't even cook or turn on a light. And yet the beauty of having 24 hours where you choose, because it's your faith, to not check your email, to not do your laundry, to not go food shopping, to truly be with family, read, garden, enjoy a full day of rest. Like God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. There's a reason. And so that's my practice. My practice is to make sure I have a 24-hour clip where I'm not just doing personal work. I'm not working.
Wow. So you don't do the check email, social media. You are gone for 24-hour period. It's like you go dark.
Yeah. And even if it's like half of Saturday and Sunday morning, it's a period of time where I connect with friends. I go for walks. I read. I go visit my mom. But I don't do tasks that don't either edify me or bring me joy or relax me.
You said you've been doing that pretty good the last few months.
Yeah.
Have you found it really helps? Do you look forward to it?
I look forward to it. I used to have, years ago, when I was working on balance, when my business was young, I had what I called an oasis morning. So I think it was Wednesday mornings, from the time I woke up until noon, I wasn't allowed to do anything except something that would bring me joy. And so this is an extension of that. And, you know, there's a saying that dull tool can toil all day long and then get nothing done. But a sharp tool, which is what we are after a day off, I find it's mind-boggling how accomplished I can be after taking the time off.
Wow. Well, I do intermittent fasting, so I don't eat for 16 hours. I stop eating at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I don't eat till 12 or 1 o'clock the next day. So I like the idea of just taking a 24-hour period and just saying it's about everything other than work and on electronics. I'm unplugging my brain. I like that.
Yeah. And if you're reading because you're enjoying it. So my self-help books don't fall into the Sabbath, you know, but a novel or a biography or something, you know, that I'm interested in can. Yeah.
Good for you. Thank you for doing this. I know, you had some computer issues we were worried about, but let's send some good vibes to your poor computer.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, in the world you live in, your computer that's your number one tool.
Yes.
Other than the phone.
Big trouble if I don't have the phone and the computer.
We're sending good vibes to both of them. Let's end it up with this. Let's tell people how to find you right now. And then one more time, go over the new series you have coming and how people can find that, please.
Okay, so Journey Beyond Divorce, our main website is jbddivorcesupport.com. Our podcasts are housed there, although any platform that you listen in, Journey Beyond Divorce. Our current series is High Conflict Divorce, and then we're about a dozen shows into that. And then starting with Clint next week, we are launching our Voices of Celebration, which will be a whole series on former clients talking about the fears that they had during divorce, what they struggled with, and what life is actually like post-divorce.
And I promise that I'll try to use better words than like, it sucks, it doesn't suck, it's beautiful. I'll get in my thesaurus in the next week and make sure that I bring my A game for you.
You'll be perfect just the way you are.
Thank you. Spoken like a good coach. Thank you, Karen McMahon. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.